Good evening, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. If it'd be useful actually if a few people could just let me know how the sound is in the chat. It's always good to check these things. If you can't, it'd be good to know. Excellent. We've got some comments that they can hear, so we're good. Welcome to An Evening with Claude Vuichard. My name is John Franklin, and I'm Head of Safety Promotion at EASA. We've got hopefully a very interesting evening and discussions for you over the next 2 hours or so. For those of you who haven't had anything to do or with our safety promotion materials so far, or heard anything about all of the different work we're doing, I'd like to start just by talking very briefly about where you can find all the different material that we're creating with EASA's safety promotion materials. So we have this Together for Safety brand that we use for our safety promotion material as part of particularly a collaboration with the European Safety Promotion Network Rotorcraft, which is a collaboration with people across the industry. And one of the particular things then we have as part of our wider sort of collaborative activities is something we call conversation aviation. And this is then just trying to open up really positive conversations about safety across all sorts of different parts of aviation, whether it's the fixed wing community, airports, ATM, and similarly here with the helicopter and rotorcraft community. And in this kind of collaboration, we're reaching out to people in all sorts of different activities with all sorts of different views and ideas. And the main thing is to start these discussions and have these conversations in the industry. When it comes to our safety promotion, I'm ably supported in our team. I don't know if you can put your camera on, Michel, as well, by my colleague Michel Masson, who's our safety promotion lead for Rotorcraft. Michel, can you just briefly say hi and introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. Hi to everybody. Normally, I'm known as coordinator of the ESPNR together with Bernd Oswald from Airbus Helicopters. So see a lot of posts I make for you on the LinkedIn community, LinkedIn groups. And as you know, we have three generic one, all topics on the sling and load and hoist operations as well. So I'm glad to be here tonight with you, and I'm glad to have kind of facilitated this evening and enable it to occur. Thank you, John. Over.
Thanks, Michel, and great that you could join us, and great to have so many people here registered. We're approaching 200 people now online. We've got several hundred people registered, and actually it's worth mentioning perhaps for that reason, obviously, as part of this, we're kind of pushing the technologies of our WebEx system to the limit here. So we are going to be showing some videos, and hopefully we've tested them and they work reasonably well. Yeah, there might be a bit of stuttering that you'll see in the videos, but hopefully, yeah, we've checked them quite a few times now, and different places there. Hopefully it at least enables you to experience the videos that we're going to share with you today, and particularly take part in this interesting session. Now, one thing also perhaps to mention is that in order to kind of save the bandwidth and make things easier with WebEx events, as participants, you're all muted and your cameras are off. So if you're looking to try and unmute yourself and turn your cameras on, it's not possible in that sense for participants. But this is where, obviously, having conversation aviation and nobody being able to interact is a bit pointless. So one of the key parts of this is then how you can interact with us. So we have a number of different ways of doing that. Now, in the WebEx itself, there is a chat and a Q&A. Now, and again, we'll be monitoring all of them, and if you do it in the wrong one, it's not a huge problem. But I would say if you have any technical problems or would like to ask me a question, particularly us as Michel and I as the host, if you could put that in the chat part of the system. Then if you've got any questions, you should be able to see Slido there within the system. So if you go to the dots at the bottom right-hand corner, it's either under apps and then Slido, or you should be able to see Slido itself. And in there, there are some polls, and we have a couple of polls that we will pose during the session. And then also within the Slido there is a Q&A, and by using the Slido Q&A, which has just been enabled now, you can ask your questions. Actually, what you can also do is kind of click and upvote and downvote other people's questions, so that then you can kind of, we can help to see which are the kind of most popular questions depending on what we get them, and manage them like that. There's an awful lot to remember, so don't worry too much. Use the chat, use the Q&A, use the Slido, whichever works. If you can get near my apartment, feel free to roll a brick through the open window. That works too, but you've got to find me first. Now, in terms of the session itself, perhaps I was going to also just talk a little bit more about our Together for Safety initiative. And as Michel said, we have this EASA rotorcraft community where we post lots of different material and all the work that we do collaboratively. And one of the joys of the rotorcraft community, that it's kind of separate from the EASA website, although linked. So if you have a log on for the EASA website, and you can do that with any social media account or separately as well, you can also then sign up for rotorcraft updates, and you'll get all the updates from anything to do with the EASA from the rotorcraft side of things, or indeed any other domain you might be interested in. So you'll get this different material. But when you also sign up and you link that into the rotorcraft community, it then becomes a two-way conversation. So you can talk to us, you can even make posts of your own, and this is where it becomes, although it's something kind of owned by us as EASA, but as a regulator, we encourage continual discussion, and you can comment on the different articles and posts that are posted by us or other collaborative partners that we have. And a great example of that is the Vuichard Recovery Safety Foundation that we're hosting tonight's conversation aviation with. And as I say, it's very much in Together for Safety about starting these positive conversations. And kind of one of the key things of that is that, and I think this topic of unintended IMC or VFR into IMC, however you choose to call it, it's one of many topics where there are lots of different solutions to this problem, lots of different views we know already as we've done this work. And talking to Claude and working with Philippe and the team at VR Motion and Air Zermatt and the others that have helped put this together and this whole evening. And one of the things we know already is that there might be some things in here that could be up for debate and discussion. And the important thing is really not to shy away from that discussion. It's to open it up and talk about these things. And this is really what we're here to do. We're here to share some things that have been discussed and debated, and continue kind of working together to figure out how we can be as safe and continually learn and develop as a community of rotorcraft experts, pilots, specialists and organisations. So you've heard enough from me already now. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the first part of the video and run through this first bit and really just to use it to set the scene as to what we're going to talk about this evening. So I'm going to share the video with you, and you'll hopefully it will all work perfectly.
What a wonderful sunny day. Unfortunately, this is not always the case, and many helicopter missions have to be carried out in very bad weather conditions. In my career to date, I had 3 UIMC. All 3 UIMC occurred at night and with precipitations over unlit areas. In the last 2 UIMC, I had an IFR rating, and the helicopter was either IFR certified or at least IFR equipped. In these 2 cases, I was able to recover by climbing and joining IFR without any problems. Since the area and the weather conditions, no icing, allowed it. My absolute terrifying UIMC happened right here. After waiting for 2 hours in Visp Hospital to see if we had to transfer a patient to Bern, we took the flight back to Zermatt. During these 2 hours, the weather in the valley towards Zermatt had deteriorated. No weather station and webcams existed at this time. The takeoff from the hospital was in a well-lighted area and uneventful. A few minutes later, we turned into the valley towards Zermatt. It was overcast, we didn't see the sky, but the illuminated village and other lights were well visible. Suddenly, all light disappeared. My first thought was, the power in the valley is out. I turned on my landing light and I realized that I was in a full IMC in a very heavy snow shower. I turned the landing light off again and asked my crew if they could see anything. Their no was like a slap in my face. My pulse started to rise and I tried to control my fast breathing. I must emphasize that I had no experience in instrument flying at this time. I was horrified by the stories I have heard that pilots end up upside down in no time. The only thing I knew was that in auto rotation this could not happen, except to fall into a spiral dive. So I reduced the power with the collective to reduce the speed a little below VY, about roughly 50 knots, and blocked the cyclic with my two knees to prevent me from suddenly losing control. Descending was not possible because the valley was full of cables. I controlled the vertical speed with the collective only. Asked the crew again if they could see anything. Beside my loud, strong pulse, I almost couldn't hear anything else. I decided to turn 45 degrees to the left and fly towards the slope. I blocked again the cyclic with my knees on the new heading. I knew there weren't any cables in the way, and that when I turned the landing light on again, I would find a reference above the forest and the rocks. Again and again, I asked the crew if they could see anything. I had the impression that we were already during 20 minutes in IMC. My pulse reached its maximum, and again, I thought that now they had to see something, or we all be dead. Suddenly came the cry from the crew, "Visual contact with the forest!" I looked out and I saw the forest in the landing light too. Then we flew down slowly to avoid a vortex wing state, and then I needed to follow the road to the next village, where we landed on a place near a factory. After stopping the rotor, my back muscles were blocked, and I had all my hair in the air. I had produced just as much adrenaline during the last minutes as I have produced during the last years. We went to a hotel where I couldn't sleep for a second because the huge amount of adrenaline in my blood. Hi guys, my name is Claude Vuichard. I was the pilot in this snowstorm 35 years ago, and I'm better known from the Vuichard recovery, but I can tell you at this time it was more a recovery of the Vuichard. I have had 3 UIMC experiences so far in my career. All were at night and with precipitations, either snow or rain, over regions without residual lightning on the ground. Listen carefully how to prevent UIMC, and if it does occur, what you need to keep in mind. Therefore, my lessons learned to avoid UIMC.
Hi everybody. So hopefully you found that first part of the video interesting, and you know, it starts to get you thinking a little bit about the situation. So the first thing we're going to do actually is hopefully, I know some people are having some problems perhaps with the Slido. So if you are, apologies for that, but feel free just to drop anything that you're trying to do into the Q&A or the chat, etc. Now, what I'm going to do before we get started is just to launch a small poll on Slido, just to find out how many people we've got nearly 300 people online now, how many people in the audience have experienced this type of situation for themselves. So I've got that. It's basically a simple yes or no answer. So we'll leave that running for a few minutes, and who better now, obviously, to hand over to and now to introduce to our evening than obviously Claude Vuichard. So Claude, welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. Yeah, it's great that we could finally get a chance to do this and to talk about this topic. And I guess my first question for you would be is, obviously this event took place now 35 years ago. Why did you decide to make this video? And what led you to bringing this up now?
Okay, first of all, good evening, John, Michel, and a special thanks to the EASA for the organization of this UIMC webinar. Very important topic. And of course, everybody which I know around the world, good morning, New Zealand, South Africa, good evening. And special greetings go to Tim Tucker, because I know he's online, and because of Tim Tucker, the Vuichard name, Vuichard Recovery, is now well known. Give me also the power to do things like I can do today. Thank you, Tim. And also LAPD, and now Kevin Gallagher and all the crew is on board. Of course, additionally, a special welcome goes for me to Zurich, Switzerland. Why? Because it goes to Fabi Reason and his incredible engineering team from VFR, Switzerland, who are making tremendous contribution to improving helicopter safety with their, in brackets, pocket simulators. Okay, so you're coming back to your just something I need to mention. When we shoot the movie in the simulator of VFR, I was soaking wet because I had a flashback. I was asking, the same situation. I should see something. Yeah, you will. Okay, you will see. You will see soon. You will see soon. Because the simulator is so realistic that I was in a fully immersion. And now, John, to your questions, why I took 35 years to come out with this event? Because I was not well known before. That is the first of all. But the second, when I look on the UIMC accident statistic, with almost 300 accidents in the last 20 years, and only in the civil market, this is dramatic. Therefore, I decide to make my story public to all, and not only to make the story public, but to give all what you can have to avoid. And if it happens, what you can do. It's my opinion, it's my technique. I say always, I sell nothing. I sell nothing, I sell all the Vuichard Recovery, I sell nothing. I will never sit inside the aircraft when you are in IMC or in a vortex. So for me, it's my point of view. And what you mentioned before, John, that we will do a webinar with experts, and I think it's a really good initiative. But it's my point of view, and the movie is on the homepage of the foundation. After you can watch it, you get the link later on. Okay, so
And actually, yeah, that's a good point. We will shortly put the link in the chat, and I'll put it in a few times during the session so you can save that. We'll also post it tomorrow on the community site so people can have access to that. So that helps at all. I've got just maybe to mention, there are a couple of people with challenges with the audio. So we found with WebEx, if you have a problem with the audio, try going out and coming back in again, or perhaps even using try Firefox. Browsers seem to work better. I hope that helps for those people who are having any problems at all hearing this. Now, Claude, thanks for that first insight. I think it's really valuable to get that, your initial thoughts on that. And I guess that the next question I would have for you is, obviously you talked about, and we're going to see it in the video a bit later on as well, more visually, is how, first of all, how to prevent getting into this type of situation in the first place. What are your kind of key thoughts and key points on that one?
Okay, you will see in the movie, of course, it starts with the flight planning. It starts with the question, what is my willingness to take a risk at the end? But it starts also with experience and how you can get experience if you are not able to fly in bad weather to get experience. So now we have these amazing tools coming on the market. We can do it on the simulator. But probably one of the biggest factor is that today the helicopter, they are twice the speed than before. Yeah, Bell 47 was traveling with 70 knots. Today, 139, you're traveling with 160 knots. It's the late adaptation of the speed to the DVE environment. That is, for me, one of the key points. Because the second is when you break the speed, you have suddenly increase of the rotor RPM. If you try to correct that with the collective, you climb like the space shuttle in the clouds. And that is, for me, one of the key factors. Of course, the other key factors at night, if you are in operation, we should use NVIS today. Because if you are a private operator flying with moon, sky, and whatever, high light level, it's not a problem. But as soon as you go in operation and you are forced to fly in an EMS, whatever, search and rescue over the sea, you choose not the weather because the situation, the accident is then, but the weather is not good, maybe. So for me, that is the biggest challenge. So in Europe from 2023, we will also see in the movie, the NVIS becomes mandatory for HEMS, so EMS for night operation. And SIG, in my point of view, is probably one of the best regulation the EASA has done for the safety of the HEMS operation. It's to implement, it's mandatory, cannot fly at night, HEMS operation without NVIS. And that, for me, it's a key factor to save human lives in the future in this kind of operations.
And when we were talking about this before and preparing, we had a really good discussion about the importance of using instruments in the cockpit effectively, and in that kind of dynamic situation. Maybe you can talk a bit more about your thoughts on the cockpit instruments and the information sources available to pilots these days.
Okay, what we have today, that we have really big equipments where you have whatever kind, Garmin, whatever, you have Helionics, avionics, whatever you can have. You have big equipment, people cannot use it. That is a pity. If you are not IFR and not trained and not current, you cannot use it. You have a big screen in front of you, you're watching the television, but you don't see what happens in the movie. So for me, it's a factor. So we need to change several things. One of my proposals is also, for example, we need to make the IFR, helicopter IFR, more accessible. That means maybe even integrate in the CPL, the IFR rating, why not? Today we have simulators, you can fly 40 hours on the simulator. We don't need the twin engine to accomplish the IR rating. But for me, more IFR knowledge, more IFR knowledge on the equipment will be so for sure saving many situations. And so I think also that for me it's also the evidence-based training. it's the most important thing in the avoidance of a UIMC. I did now in cooperation with Mountain Flyers Switzerland, where they have 2 VRM simulators. I just set up a UIMC avoidance and recovery safety course. It will be available, I think, from January, February. It's based on simulators, based on evidence situation that leads to an UIMC. And I think that it's a very nice training. It's the first flight training organization, or ATO in the EASA, which offer this kind of training. Really, that means what is the best recovery technique of a UIMC is the avoidance. But once you are in, you need to know what you need to do. That should be bold face. You cannot open the book where once you are in the IMC and try to find the page where what to do. It's a bold face. You must an automatic. You must be able to, and you will see in my movie. I show technique. This of the technique. Probably you saw that I reduce the speed to VY, because you will see at VY the influence of the cyclic is almost nothing. So if you are at high speed, you have an influence on the cyclic. If you have at VH, maximum cruise speed, if you increase the speed by 10 knots, you have immediately 1,000 feet rate of descent. And opposite if you reduce. So if you are not trained, it's a battle with your aircraft. And it ends up hitting the planet at the end. And so for me, as I said, the most important thing in this is training. We need to change the training. We need to make the name the same. VFR to IMC is probably the best. UIMC is one of the terminology, but unintended IMC, so we have inadvertent entry into IMC. We have a lot of the terminology. The best is to start to speak all together from the same. For me, VFR to IMC is clear. It's probably very clear what it is. You're changing flight rules. You're on the VFR flight rules, and suddenly you have IMC, instrument meteorological conditions. But anyhow, for me, the training, evidence-based training is the future. And you can only do it in a simulator. Even you have now the Icarus, to simulate the DVE in the aircraft. That is nice too, also, of course, because you can change the visibility and you see only your panel. It's also a great tool for the improvement, but it's all evidence-based training. And evidence-based training needs an analyze which situation leads to a new IMC, which situation leads to accidents. And in the simulator, we do it again 5-10 times until the guy has the right decision and say, now I brake here, or I make a 180 before I'm IMC. But anyhow, the best UIMC is avoidance. But if it happens, you must be clear what you need to do. And if you try to maintain VH and make the turn, probably in the Swiss mountains, you will not finish the turn, and you're in the Alps. You cannot climb. You cannot climb. At the end, you have ice. You are in the middle of the ice, rocks, and fall from the sky. I just speaking about what means IMC icing. We had in Switzerland an incident with a 139. He went, as was an IFR flight, went in the clouds at the flight level 7-8 or something like 8-8. So he descended 2 levels in the IMC. It was not a de-iced 139. And the people didn't feel comfortable. So we do a go around, so we climbed 2 levels again. They were unable. They charged so many ice that the aircraft fall on the back, and they declared an emergency. They went out and fall out from the sky. They survived, but icing and helicopter, something it's not to mix together. So avoidance and the technique I will show later on in the movie is to be as shortest as possible in IMC with a very small radius. And that we will see. We need to reduce the IMC time, and we need to be very close from your last visual reference point. If you have your last visual reference point here, you go in the clouds and you get out 3 kilometers or 2 miles ahead from there, you will never come out. You know, you will continue to fly IMC even if you didn't have hit the planet before. But anyhow, that's my point of view. But anyhow, I must also emphasize, I survived with one of these techniques by reducing the speed. In this, it was an Alouette tree. I had no artificial horizon in this IMC event. I had only a gyro, probably better because I was not trained for. But anyhow, to say, of course, today we have big equipments, perfect things. We have speed vectors, we have altitude vectors, we have everything. And so the only thing is the training. And we must train up to proficiency everybody to avoid, and in case it happens, what I need to do. But you cannot open the book. It's too late.
And I think that's such a key point, and actually something obviously we talk a lot about in our safety promotion work, is that, you know, one of the challenges about any situation where there are lots of different views on the situation is, you know, if as regulators particularly, and we also talk about it in the wider community, is if we provide pilots particularly, but, you know, anybody in a dynamic situation with, as you say, you know, about 15 choices, they have no hope to be able to action in the time available, we potentially haven't helped anyone. And I think this is, you know, where it's so important to open the discussion on these kinds of things, because, you know, it's you know, how can we, if you're in that situation and you have such a short space of time in order to act, you know, it's what you remember from, you know, other things you've seen potentially that might save your life. And it's interesting, particularly that, as you mentioned about evidence-based training, it's, you know, as you say, that's such an important evolution now. And certainly I've been involved over time, over the last few years, in the EASA rulemaking work on evidence-based training for rotorcraft. And I know it's something that's, you know, coming in, and certainly more with our rotorcraft roadmap, with, you know, the opportunity to use, as you say, you know, virtual reality training devices that enables you to do something in a simulator that you couldn't do in a normal helicopter. You know, there's so many more possibilities that technology allows. And particularly if there's anybody in the industry sat there thinking that they might be dreading you know, future implementation of evidence-based training, hopefully we can offer some hope, certainly from our side, is that, you know, if I take the example of evidence-based training now in the fixed wing side, yeah, we're going through the evolution of implementation now, and we've just launched today actually the registration for the 5th EBT webinar on how we do that, and particularly supporting the industry in implementing things in a practical way. And, you know, I see there's a comment from Alex about, you know, no more nonsense regulations from EASA, and one of the challenges obviously we have is balancing the need for, you know, regulation with the need for prescription, and you know, that certainly the strategic activity or strategic goal from the agency is performance-based regulations and trying to minimize all of that. And we've had a considerable drop in the amount of regulations. Michel, I saw you turned your camera on, so that you've got something to add, which would be great in this situation.
Yes, I felt like I could add something to this debate, and the first thing to recognize is a positive message is that such a situation is recoverable. But as Claude mentioned, the primary priority, and I think everybody agrees on that, is avoidance. That's for sure. Never find yourself there, and that US HST video called 56 Seconds to Live pursue exactly the objective of raising awareness in pilots so that they never put themselves in such a situation. It has a great merit to do that. But we are talking about unintended or unintentional IMC. So it's granted that the pilots didn't look for him and may found themselves in such a situation. So I need the excellent message from the 56 second to live video needs to be complemented by saying, and it's particularly the case in a recent excellent video by Bruce Rapp from Airbus Helicopters, is that now if you find yourself there, don't think about what led you there. It's too late. You're now in that situation. You have to manage it and you have to survive. And it's possible if you do the right things. Last part of the message is indeed when we're talking about recovery, we know that there are different techniques, and Claude's video will at least mention two and provide a list of conditions needed for using one or the other. And that debate currently isn't closed. There are pros and cons of both method. I'm talking about climbing or making a U-turn. And it's really a matter of debate and a webinar like this one, a conversation like this one, has also the merit to present these various options and discuss them with the community now in the webinar and later on with the appropriate teams, until we can provide a very clear and practical message to the pilots so that if that happens, they know what they have to do. Because we know that under emergency situation, it is difficult to have a complicated procedures with conditionals, and you'd better do right thing and do it well. And in that particular case, you can save the day. Thank you.
Thanks, Michel. And just to add a couple of things, just from questions in the chat that we've had. So yes, we are recording this webinar and we'll be posting that on the community site probably at some point tomorrow. Hopefully it takes a little bit of time just to edit the video down and get it on the YouTube and post it on, but we'll get that on tomorrow for sure and share that on the LinkedIn. Particularly also, if you're not a member already, also can join the ESPNR LinkedIn group as well. I've also just posted in the chat the link to where the video will be posted in the Vuichard Recovery Safety Foundation page. And I'll drop that later again, and that will be posted from 1900 when we finish the session here. And perhaps, Claude, maybe now's the time to let the movie run a little bit further, and we run the next section, and then we come back and we'll have some questions and answers then, and continue the discussion. So I'll run the video now.
UIMC prevention starts with a serious flight planning using all available means, including satellite and weather radar images, precipitation forecasts, normal and infrared webcams. Precipitation can massively reduce visibility, especially in case of heavy precipitation and snow showers. Visibility can be reduced significantly. Below 1 kilometer, 0.5 miles. Heavier precipitations also lead to rapid lowering of the cloud base, and high humidity on the ground creates additional fog and lower clouds. There are other phenomena that can reduce the visibility very quickly, such as very humid air, snow showers, or sandstorms.
Let's take a look at the flight planning for a VFR flight from Paris to Bern. First, we look at the weather radar and detect several shower cells, actual and forecasted on the route. It's extremely important to pay attention to the calculated amount of precipitation. Unfortunately, the radar cannot detect clouds. For this additional information, we need to switch to the mixed satellite and radar images, actual and forecasted, and immediately the planned flight becomes more difficult. Now we analyze the MEDAR on the route, and we see that the MEDAR in Lima Sierra Golf Charlie indicates broken at 400 feet and overcast at 600 feet. This weather doesn't permit a safe VFR flight in this region. The MEDAR of Bern is good, scattered at 4,000 feet and broken at 6,000 feet. Additionally, we look at this situation on a platform like Windy and see the current and calculated cloud bases. Unfortunately, the various cloud bases on our route are marginal. We conclude that this flight cannot be safely conducted under VFR with the current and forecasted visibility. Be aware that the reported meteorological visibility is usually much better than your actual flight visibility, unless there are haze or fog banks on the ground. What risk am I willing to take is probably the best question at the end of any flight planning. Special precautions for night operations. Clean your windshields inside and out to avoid reflections. Check the operation of taxi, landing, and searchlights, and position the anti-collision lights. If the flight takes you from lit to unlit regions and the cloud base cannot be clearly visible, it can become dangerous very quickly, and especially with additional precipitations. If possible, keep the landing light on at all times during flight so you can detect precipitations such as snow and clouds at an early stage. This will allow you to react early and not be surprised when it's already too late. To avoid vertigo, strobe and anti-collision lights must sometimes be switched off in humid air. It's hazardous to perform VFR flights at night over unlit areas and over water without visibility of the stars or the moon in low light level conditions. Unless you have a clear mission to accomplish in such situations, you should absolutely refrain from such flights. Otherwise than with NVIS. After 2023 for night HEMS in Europe, the use of NVIS will become mandatory. This is an important regulation to ensure the safety of this type of operations in the future. Be aware that over illuminated regions, you tend to fly in worse weather conditions at night than during the day. Lower visibility can become critical as soon as you leave illuminated regions. Flying between cloud layers can rapidly become very tricky because suddenly it isn't possible to clearly distinguish the cloud layers any longer. Consequently, you have to be extraordinarily careful during such missions. Especially in precipitations, you can lose the orientation very quickly. This scenario can be perfectly demonstrated in the VRM Switzerland FSTD.
Okay, so we're going to pause the video there just for a few minutes and move now to the discussions. And so I can give Claude some of the questions that we've got already. The first thing that I thought might be interesting to share with you is the data on the poll that we had. So particularly, we had 133 people had completed the poll. And just check that it's still 133. Yeah, we had 134 votes or people had answered the poll, and 43% of people have been in that situation. So, of that 134, so doing my kind of rough maths, we're talking 60 plus people just in our small group of around 300 people here that we've got connected. We've got that many people who've been involved in that situation. So it's interesting that to share that, and interestingly, we've done various surveys and other things on this topic, and it's something that we know it's an important topic. So it's great to have this discussions. So if I go to some of the first questions that we've got, and actually the first one from Dr. Alex, who asks, did you find in the situation you found yourself in originally 35 years ago, did you find your knowledge of the area, the geography, etc., help to play a role in your decision making? And I guess that highlights the importance of kind of mentally thinking about the route you're going to fly in before you go, rather than just kind of being there following a map and that kind of thing.
Absolutely, of course, it was in the valley. And so you are not over the sea, so you have less escape. You can hardly sometimes do 180 degrees, maybe. But anyhow, of course, the region you fly, it's always to take in account of your decision making, of your risk you want. If you fly over the sea, maybe you have other problems. If you fly in the mountains, you know you cannot climb in IMC up to flight level 300 with your helicopter, so you'll never get there. So of course, it's to take in account. Today, of course, we have a new big avionics, we have electronic charts, we have all what we now make it a little bit easier as before. But anyhow, it should not should not have an influence on your risk assessment, because the visibility must be here, the ceiling must be here, and especially at night. My case, I went in a cloud without seeing this before, because the angle gave me first the lights back from the villages, and suddenly you climb in the cloud, flap, and it's like plop, and you're in there. The transition was very fast, I remember. But anyhow, important is the flight planning, and today we have so many tools. I just wrote that the FAA is now implementing the webcams system also. We should also have aviation webcams, in my point of view, because if you have a webcam from a restaurant and you can read the menu, but maybe the picture is already 1 week old, we should have certified webcams for the aviation. That should be a deal, infrared and day with 360, but certified. That means we are sure that there's not all pictures, and they are on the key points where we need to have the weather. That, in my point of view, should be also the future, to have a net in Europe of certified cameras, and not from a provider. You don't know who is the provider, how old are the pictures. That is, for me, also very important. And even for people who need to fly at night, it's nice to have an infrared webcam when you know the region, you see your hospital where you need to go. And that could be an input to change several things in the planning.
It's really exciting that you talking about webcams. I remember I've been doing safety promotion here at EASA for a couple of years now. And I remember actually, as I was transitioning from my previous job in safety analysis to safety promotion, I had a trip to the US to meet with the FAA about some analysis things, but I was then also talking about some of the other things on safety promotion and meeting some of the FAA folks involved in that. And it was really interesting to see that it was still in the early stages at that point, but particularly at that stage, it was mainly in Alaska, where they had, as you say, Claude, these airfield webcams in some places, and you could go onto the website and see what a clear VMC day looked like, and then see what the camera looked like, and then to have the ability as a pilot to see this is what the approach should look like, and this on a good day, and this is what it actually looks like now, is so invaluable, and certainly something we took back from that, and certainly, from our side, European level, I think trying to find a way to help us implement something like that in particularly in high risk locations, I think would just, it's something definitely that would be useful.
We have in aviation, everything is certified. The weather station is certified. The METAR you get is certified. Everything is certified except the webcam. You don't know who are the provider. You don't know what is the quality of the webcam. We cannot. And for me, that could be really an input for safety for avoidance of UIMC.
And it's interesting. It's one of the things that we have in our GA roadmap, particularly, is one of the challenges we have is that the certifying certain things, everything can sometimes add a cost that makes technology implementation prohibitive. So it's actually one of the pillars of our GA roadmap. Certainly is to look at how can we find the balanced level of cost and level of certification to certain technologies, and I can sense this as an area Michel knows very well. So, Michel, do you want to jump in as well?
Yes, I wanted to mention a point about how advanced Switzerland is regarding these topics, as I heard again from notably from Stefan Becker in Cologne at European Autos. perhaps, Claude, you could say a few words about that. That you have networks of cameras in the mountains and low-level flying routes as well. So you get information in real time, and I think it can make a difference. Considering that, as we all know, the weather in the mountains can change very rapidly. So even if you perfectly perform your flight preparation, I noted a question about that, asking if your incident was due to a poor flight preparation. I guess it's not because of that, but you had a combination of all lights going down plus a rapid change of weather, and that is becoming to be a very tricky combo.
Oh, of course, yes, in my case, it was 35 years ago. There was no weather station at all, nothing. The only thing, the weather briefing was sometimes done with the police station, and they asked them, how is the weather? Well, we look out, we see nothing. Okay, thank you. That was today, of course, we have many tools that to avoid this kind of situations. But anyhow, probably, we have a net in Switzerland. I don't know the accessibility of every operator can access to this net. I don't know exactly. But we have certainly big to the key points where we need to have the weather. We have good stations, that is for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly a thing we need to implement globally in Europe, especially in the tricky regions, to have better weather. Because when you do a flight planning, the example I did my video from Paris to Bern. So you had first the weather in Paris, okay, the weather in the Chaude Fonds, les Éplatures, on the mountain, so small mountains there, and the weather in Bern. But you have only some 3-4 weather stations. After you have the general aviation forecast route, some country they have that, some they don't. Of course, now we have new tools of showing us the ceilings, showing us the calculated visibility in function of the amount of precipitation. That helps a lot, you know. Initially, when you look on this flight Paris to Bern, I can do it. Once you go to add the satellite weather, you see, once look the METAR, WOF, once you look the visibility on the route, you say no. And once you look on the ceiling, you say no, forget it. But now we have better tools, but at the end, we need to have real weather, you know. Even you can have on board now today, you have on board access to the weather. We need to have real weather because the matter is real, but is now. You have the TAF, of course, that is the forecast of the meteorology. They are more, of course, but it's only 1, 2, 3 places on the full route, VFR route. And that, if you have implement more stations, you have the real situation exactly now, and not what is computed however. So
You
I think,
Claude, I've noted a very interesting question in the chat. Is that have we ever seen birds flying in IMC in clouds
yeah.
at night? Are they equipped with some instinctive built-in IMC avoidance capabilities? What I know for sure, that I mentioned in another article on weather at IMC, but thunderstorm and the like, is that birds do not fly into cumulonimbus. They have an instinctive understanding that it's dangerous to go there.
I
So,
have a friend of mine. He hit a duck in middle of the night. IMC. So they fly IMC.
That exists.
That exists. Probably they're better than us because they don't hit the planet when they're flying. They hit helicopters or what is flying in the night. But anyhow, that shows that a lot of birds, they're not able to fly in the clouds. Some of them are not specialists of that, but I know the story from this guy. He was flying at night, IFR, and suddenly, boom! And you see that you're hit. That is terrible, huh? Or so, yeah. But I don't know why some can fly at night. Why they don't know fly in a cumulonimbus. We are not able to make the distinction of a cumulonimbus except if we have a weather radar on board, so or a lightning sensor. So anyhow, but yeah, we are not birds. We are pilots, and of course for me, it's all a matter of training. Maybe I say it again: be persistent in relevant things is all a matter of training. We have now the possibility to train that in amazing simulators, and that is the future. We cannot train every weather situation. Maybe you need to have 10,000 or 15,000 hours to have seen every weather conditions, every weather situation. Now we can do this in 20 hours in a simulator. And we need to have the decision making. The most important thing you have always when you do decision making, you can decide. You have three things always to decide. I can fly it or cannot fly. Not flying is also a good decision sometimes. But when I fly, I can go to the left, I can go to the right. But anyhow, to not fly sometimes is the better decision. But if you don't have the experience and have never seen the situation in life, probably you go flying. You saw just 3 days ago, we have a 407 in the state. He hit the power line, it fell down on the highway. Terrible. But why is the problem? How sometimes when I did analyze of accidents, the accident were already planned when they closed the door because the pressure was here to go to the destination. Is the passenger because he has a meeting, has a wedding. The accident is already done. It's just a matter of minutes or 1 hour of flight, but the accident is already on schedule because it's impossible to fly. But the pressure, we also EASA did a movie on the pressure when you have passenger, and depending what kind of passenger. I flew 14 years with the Swiss presidents and ministry. I have also my former chief is on board. Hey, hello, Reto. And we had the decision to take in the morning to bring the president somewhere in the Switzerland. No at the station, nothing. And that and once you said that now we fly, can imagine if you are not coming to the destination. And that it was terrible. So sometimes you said, no, we don't fly. And the guy drove for 4 hours with the sunglasses to the destination and phone, are you crazy? So that it's very difficult. So once you have the pressure, when I did the analysis of several accidents in preparation of this webinar, the accident is already on schedule before they start the engine. And that is terrible.
And I think that's one of the big messages, isn't it? That ultimately videos like 56 Seconds to Live and others is, it's about the clear decision to not get into it in the first place. And maybe I mentioned that, we've got a couple of people that have dropped the link to 56 Seconds to Live. People have heard us talk about it. That's in the chat. I know Chris Hill, from HAI and my fellow co-chair of the vast safety promotion group. It's great that you could join as well. And Chris mentions that when people complete the 56 seconds course, you also get instructions on the final option of a controlled transition. So that's a useful point to perhaps add in as well. I'm just going through some of the kind of quick questions here that we've got, and actually there's one in the Q&A there in the Slido where somebody said they fully agree on evidence-based training with virtual reality, but how does EASA ensure we don't have more costly training, and talking about non-added value training reduction and things, and perhaps it's one of the key things to mention in terms of the future, the way the EASA rulemaking program and generally the actions in the European safety plan work. And then what future rules come in is it's not purely a case of people thinking, oh, we need more training, therefore all of these things suddenly go in the rules. We have this, so obviously it starts with our safety risk management process, where there's a continual analysis of the accidents and what do we see as the key safety challenges, and then future rules then go through something called the best intervention strategy, where they where not just EASA but with external collaborative partners also then assess the different challenges in the industry in implementing something. So if we have something that, we could regulate everything and bankrupt every operator in Europe, and it's obviously, that's what the BIS is there to do, is to make sure that, any actions that we have are developed, transparently with the industry and are particularly, they're, what's the word I'm looking for, balanced and appropriate, and not purely something that causes a lot of problems. And then, where there is new things, that's particularly one of the purposes of our safety promotion program, is to help understand where there might be challenges with implementation and how we can help reduce the burden for industry where there is the need for new things. But hopefully it's, we get the balance right on that one. And I'm wondering, perhaps, should we play the rest of the video through and then come back and answer more questions at that point? Does that sound like a good plan, Claude? Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Perfect. So
how many minutes we have left on the video?
It's around 10 minutes left on the video, just under. So it's not so long. Hopefully everybody can stay with us. You'll find it really interesting. There's lots of talk now of the different recovery techniques and other things. So I'll play it now and we'll go through. Thanks very much.
Okay.
The maximum acceptable angle of visual obstruction is always in function of your ground speed, the height above the ground, and the mass of the helicopter, kinetic energy. With a high mass, the deceleration distance is much longer than with a lower mass. With a visual angle of obstruction of 30 degrees, the horizontal ground visibility is 1.72 times greater than the height above the ground. If you're flying at 2,000 feet above ground level, the horizontal ground visibility will be 3,440 feet. But on the other hand, when flying lower, for example at 1,000 feet above ground level, the horizontal ground visibility will only be 1,720 feet. Therefore, it's paramount to reduce your ground speed as soon as you need to fly lower due to a lower ceiling of degraded flight visibility, even with the same angle of obstruction. If we are flying at 2,000 feet above ground level with a ground speed of 100 knots, with a visual angle of obstruction of 30 degrees at 2,000 feet above ground level, the time required to cover the horizontal distance is 11.8 seconds. At an altitude of 1,000 feet above ground level, with the same angle of obstruction, the time required for horizontal distance is only 5.2 seconds. To avoid UIMC in the future, we should train to proficiency the assessment of the maximum ground speed in function of different visual angles of obstruction and height above ground level in a modern FSTD. The FSTD should be able to simulate DVE in different operational conditions and environments, such as those of VRM Switzerland. The blue curve shows the power required for a desired true airspeed at level flight for a given weight, altitude, and temperature. Setting the maximum cruise power, the helicopter will cruise at maximum horizontal speed VH. The delta between power setting and power required is therefore 0. As soon as the helicopter decreases its forward speed by 10 knots, caused by a very small cyclic input, immediately the helicopter starts to climb with a rate of climb of roughly 1,000 feet per minute. Or, if the helicopter increases its speed with the same power setting, the helicopter immediately starts to descend with a rate of descent of 1,000 feet per minute. On the other hand, if the power setting is reduced to roughly 40% torque, corresponding to Vy speed, for the best rate of climb, an increase or decrease of the speed by 10 knots will result in a rate of descent of only roughly 200 feet per minute. With very small collective inputs, it's easy to correct the situation to maintain level flight at Vy. Difference in the value of the turn radius for a 180-degree turn at VH or VY with the AW139. If we fly the 180 degree with a standard rate turn with a VH of 160 knots, the bank angle will be 24 degrees. The turn radius will be 0.84 nautical miles, and the rate of turn will be 3 degrees per second. For a 180 degree turn, it takes you 1 minute. Your position will be 1.6 nautical miles away from your last visual reference point. If you use the coupler of the autopilot at VH, the helicopter will need the same space for the turn. Reducing the power setting corresponding to VY of 80 knots, simultaneously start your turn with a bank of 25 degrees. The turn radius will be only 0.2 nautical miles. The rate of turn will be 6.36 degrees per second. For a 180 degree turn, it takes you only 26 seconds. Your position will be 0.4 nautical miles away from your last point of visual references. Difference in the value of the turn radius for a 180 degree turn at VH or VY with the H125. If we fly the 180 degree with a standard rate turn with a VH of 130 knots, the bank angle will be 20 degrees, and the turn radius will be 0.68 nautical miles. The rate of turn will be 3 degrees per second. For a 180 degree turn, it takes you 1 minute. Your position will be 1.36 nautical miles away from your last visual reference point. If you use the coupler of the autopilot at VH, the helicopter will need the same space for the turn. Reducing the power setting corresponding to VY of 60 knots, simultaneously start your turn with a bank of 25 degrees. The turn radius will be only 0.11 nautical miles. The rate of turn will be 8.5 degrees per second. For a 180 degree turn, it takes you only 21 seconds. Your position will be 0.22 nautical miles away from your last point of visual references. Avionics or navigation applications that record the flight track are very helpful, as they allow us to fly back on the opposite track. In summary, the effect of cyclic inputs at fast cruise is huge and results immediately in a high rate of descent or climb. Without a serious instrument, training, and recency, it will end rapidly in a battle to maintain control in a UIMC, leading in the worst case to lose control of the helicopter. Around VY, the effect of cyclic inputs is very small, and therefore the cyclic can be fixed with your upper thigh when the desired speed around VY is reached, and then you can just correct the vertical speed by small collective inputs only. This technique will prevent loss of control in UIMC, and the turn radius will be roughly for time, less with 25 degrees of bank angle. This could be paramount, especially with small obstacle clearances. It's obvious that this VY 180 degree turn technique must be practiced regularly, so that in case of UIMC, it can also be applied correctly under high stress. The main killing factor in most UIMC accidents is the late adjustment of the speed to the degraded visual environment. Modern helicopters have a cruise speed up to KIAS 160. This more than twice as fast as previous helicopters, and they're very difficult to brake quickly due to very high kinetic energy. The speed is then adapted far too late to the DVE. In addition, this rapid braking leads to a rapid increase of rotor RPM. If you try to adjust the high rotor RPM situation by pulling the collective, it usually ends rapidly with a climb into the clouds. The helicopter has a cruise speed 10 to 20 times greater than a bad weather front. Therefore, the weather cannot be to blame. Because a UIMC occurs suddenly, despite all precautions, you must train your escape procedure beforehand. This clearly shows that 180 degree turns at VY are possible even with very small obstacle clearances. Prevent any situation that could lead to a UIMC, both by proper weather briefings and alertness regarding possible DVE in flight during the day and night. and by reducing the speed when encountering a DVE. Options in event of UIMC. If the helicopter is IFR certified, and the pilot has an IFR rating, and the infrastructure allows IFR, and the performance allows it to operate at minimum safe altitude without icing conditions, or if the helicopter is fully de-iced, climb and contact ATC and declare an emergency. If you have a helicopter without IFR certification, or the pilot is without an IFR rating, or you're in an area without any IFR infrastructure, train and use the VY 180-degree turn technique.
Although every effort must be made to not get in IMC, I must emphasize that in my case, the speed reduction and the holding of the altitude with small collective changes was life-saving. Therefore, I recommend every pilot and operator to practice this VY 180 degrees turn technique regularly. Also using modern avionics like HTAWS and autopilots in appropriate simulators certified to simulate DVE up to IMC. An appropriate instrument training on the simulator should be completed annually. I recommend that VFR flights at night over unlit regions and water without visibility of the stars or moon should not be undertaken with naked eyes only, unless they have a clear mission to accomplish, and such situations they should absolutely use NVIS. Clearly, modern simulators like those of VRM Switzerland, with training of adequate procedures, will prevent UIMC accidents in the future. Anyhow, guys, my hat is off to all crews that operate at the limits in adverse weather, also during night, with the sole purpose of saving human lives. Fly safe.
Hello? I don't hear you.
Oh, we had a small technical problem there. I forgot to unmute, so now I'm unmuted. Perhaps just to follow off that. Thanks. Lots of people on the chat had spotted it before I had. Fantastic. Thanks. And one of the interesting things, particularly I think about what was shown in that video, like everything in flight, so many examples in flight safety, is that that everybody will be able to point to a situation where a way of doing something saves a life or doesn't save a life, and this is where there's not always one solution that you can say, here we go. As we saw at the end of the video, there are lots of different solutions, and it's the more we can have these conversations and talk about the different challenges, I think that's so important. And it's interesting, particularly similarly, I know there were some things it's interesting that I've seen in the Q&A, particularly that are perhaps worth just quickly commenting on before we come back to ask some further questions to Claude, is that one example, I know there was one question, one comment there about the effectiveness of webcams versus other things, and I think it's more about what options are there collectively. Again, it's not there's always solution A or solution B, and it's one or the other. I think this is where webcams, we were talking about the context where it's not that a webcam is 100% the only solution, but if I can think of a number of accidents, particularly one we were talking about in the office at EASA over the last week or so, in a GA context, where if the pilot who he was flying from one place to another, and even when he was speaking to somebody at the destination airfield who said, no, it's don't come, the weather is terrible, there is a mountain near the runway, or a hill near the runway, and you cannot see it, and it's really terrible. And now if the guy had been able to go onto a webcam service and actually see that for himself, there's a significant possibility that particular accident may have been prevented. Because the guy would have looked and gone, oh my goodness, that is really as bad as the person says it is, and it was a relatively short distance. I think that's the key thing: is there's no kind of silver bullet solution to every problem. And I think this is where these conversations are so interesting, and particularly. And there was another point, various points, particularly in reference to EBT, but also generally about whether it was flight crew training or the flexibility or otherwise of regulations, and particularly in the context somebody was talking about access technology. Guillermo mentioned particularly also the ability to do more training in other things other than full flight simulators, and indeed trying to explore that possibility and trying to do something in that regard is a key pillar of the EASA rotorcraft roadmap. And I know, from other regulators, there are similar activities around the world. So it's really important to perhaps mention those. Now, perhaps, Claude, if I can come to you, before we go through any questions, what are the kind of key points you'd like to mention at this stage, kind of from the end part of that video? I'm sure there are some key things you'd like to ask before we start the questions.
Of course, what I want to mention is the reduction of the power. Because if you reduce the power, going closer in the part where the influence of the speed in the rate is not big, it is almost easy. It's a little training to maintain the control. And that is probably the things, even if you fly straight, don't fly it with full speed, because you may have a situation if you are get the IMC up a valley or down a valley is not the same. Up a valley we cannot continue, you can turn, or otherwise you will see the ground soon. If you are flying down a valley, maybe with the new avionics you may follow the valley but reduce the speed, because that is the most important thing. Instability of the helicopter, except if you have an autopilot, but only 10% maybe of the helicopter have autopilots, and not this one that flying the mountains, So anyhow, for me, I think to reduce the most important message, slowly reduce the power and maintain the control of the helicopter, instead to make a battle with 1,000 feet rate of climb, 1,000 feet rate of descent, and losing the control very easy. But all this situation can be trained in a simulator, And now the discussion, I saw some question, the 180 degrees turn. Where I want to go in the upper valley, you cannot go, you cannot fly further, so you can only turn. That is, sometimes you have not the choice. But always when I publish something like the Vuichard recovery, in the beginning, nobody believed me except Tim Tucker, who took it seriously. When I made the demonstration, he asked me to provide everything around the Vuichard recovery. I was not, at this time, was not the Vuichard recovery, but anyhow, it's the same here. It's probably a little bit provocative to say this technique could save life. That is one of the techniques. But the technique save only life if you have training for that. And the most important message for me is to remove every checks in the aviation. They're for nothing. We need to make training. You may have the check once you do your PPL or CPL or IR. Otherwise, we don't need checks. We need training up to proficiency. That is the most important message. If you are working as an examiner freelance, if you fail peoples 2 times in a school, you can remove the SIM card. Nobody will call you anymore. That's for sure. So the system, for me, it's all a matter of training. And once you are trained for, up to proficiency, you don't need the checker. You know, we have the impression that the quality is better if somebody signed the paper. No, if the instructor does well his job up to proficiency, and all the money you put for the checking, you should put in the training. And that is my message. And now we have the possibility, even in the lower segment of helicopter, to do more training. But then that is, for me, the most important message: training, evidence-based training, and nothing else.
And it's
Not
interesting.
checking.
And there are quite a few comments, interesting comments. I saw one from Bob who says, IIMC is not a situation to fear when the pilot is proficient at an instrument flying. The skill of cross-check, interpret an aircraft control is use it or lose it. You know, once you kind of assume you've been there and done it, you set yourself up for disaster. And that, as you said, practice, practice won't make the pilot perfect, but it will keep them proficient, and the more we can do it, and that's particularly where lowering the barrier to simulator training to people to be able to practice things, and be
Absolutely.
well skilled at doing things is really important. Michel,
I would like to make the link between this general statement by Bob and discussion we had a little bit earlier about the 180-degree U-turn technique that we saw in the video. I also noted in the chat a critical comment saying that in the IMC, this is perhaps the most risky maneuver. This is this U-turn. But now connecting the two, if I have understood well what I saw in the video, Claude is not suggesting to perform a 180 turn if you've not been trained to do it properly. That makes the difference. Of course, if you find yourself in a cloud, you never practiced this before, and you try to go for it, you're very likely to fail and indeed crash. This is why, and Claude, you noted in the video, you have to train that in advance. And I saw a sequence where that is being practiced even in clear weather conditions until you master the maneuver. This is fundamental, I
totally agree, Michel. It's a matter of training. And what I saw, always what I explain, when I put a technique on the market, I'm sure 100% that it works. And I did training with people with almost no instrument experience. I showed him, now you do the 180 degrees turn with this technique. And they were able. I don't say so that I chose, but it's all a matter of training. You can do nothing without training, and totally agree, Michel. But if you don't know procedure that you are maybe able to turn 180 degrees with a very small radius, if you're not trained for, you will hit the planet of the valley soon after. You will hit the planet 1 minute later. So, of course, it's all a matter of training. I think this technique can be easily done, or every instructor can do that. You don't need a training for that, Reducing the power to 40% torque, making a 25 degrees bank, fixing your cyclic with your upper tight. And every pilot can train this, every instructor. It's not like the Vuichard recovery for the vortex. You need a little bit training, is better, because you are doing something that maybe have a surprise like that. This technique here can be done for everyone. But anyhow, Michel, everybody online, training.
And it's interesting. And it's interesting, actually, Peter. Hopefully, many people know Peter Muller, who's the chairman, outgoing chairman of the European Helicopter Association. Somebody we collaborate also hugely a lot with, and he reinforces that. He says it's all about training to avoid, by using all the discussed means of weather information, training to say no, training to use the available onboard equipment, training to recover from a UIMC. There's so many examples, and actually, we'll kind of maybe do a quick fire through as many questions in the chat in a second that we can. But it's interesting, and I'm loving all the different comments, because and actually we'll save this afterwards, and the follow-up material, and perhaps particularly also we have follow-up discussions in January with this vertical aviation safety team, safety promotion group we collaborate at global level with, the saying Chris Hill, HAI, and I co-chair that group, and all of the things that you've put in the chat are great. You know, it's the importance of this conversation. You know, so many great points that, you know, dare I say, even at European Rotors, I didn't get this much information on one topic and this many views on one thing in 3 days of conference. So it's great having these additional kind of tools to get information from people, particularly. It's so useful. I'm going to kind of just scroll through a bit and maybe come to some quick fire questions. Claude, yeah, go on. You were going to say.
Yeah, I think. For some people, it can be a little provocative what I showed in the movie. Of course, you need to see the movie on the HD in the full resolution. It's absolutely great movie, and I must also emphasize that I had the big help of Simon from Niederhauser from VRM. He's a professional movie maker. We cannot do a movie like this because it was a huge work to do this movie. But anyhow, go back to look the movie. That is my message. Go back to look the movie, and you analyze. There are many messages inside of this movie, not only one. But of course, they may be provocative for some people. They are used to fly over the sea. Why you turn 180 degrees? It's also ICAO exercise 180 degrees. It's mandatory as an ICAO exercise, and that if you do that at full VH, maximum speed, it's almost impossible. And that brings something new, and we need to discuss about this. Every operator says, okay, for me, that is one of the solutions. I go immediately to training with this, but it's up to the operator, it's up to each pilot, but also from the authority, I think we don't have really a solution now. What is big that we have this conversation tonight, that John set up, Michel set up this webinar. That's great, because we're starting a rolling stone that we need to do something, because the next UIMC accident is already on schedule. 2 weeks ago, we had one in Vienna, 429 crashed on the runway, and that cannot be the future. We need to change. And that is big that we're now in the rolling stone of this. As John said, we have a lot of new information here inside. Use it, they are for free. And I decide to take an early retirement. I decide to make helicopter safety to enhance globally. But I bring what I can. And when I bring something, I'm sure. It's like the other techniques. Sometimes provocative. First, you see a Vuichard recovery. What the hell is that? It's impossible to do that. It's probably the same. Go in the aircraft, go in the simulator, try the exercise, and you will see, whoa, it's so easy. Don't mean that you will need to fly in bad weather. Just try it. All the instructors on board tonight. Next time when you do with the goggles or with the Icarus shield, you do training, try it and you will see with small pointed out information correction, the guy is able to turn 20 times 360 degrees. He will not lose the control. And that is amazing in the things. And that by chance, it was a chance because I survived this event by reducing the speed. But I was not trained for. I had no instrument training. I had no instrument inside except the gyro. And I was able to survive. I'm here to speak. But I think that we need to learn from probably the other solution. I'm totally open. If somebody says me, I take a parachute and jump out, probably is also something you can do. But probably not the best one. But we are totally open, and I think it's the way to go for the safety, John. Set up a webinar, take on board all experts some from the States, from Europe. We discuss that all, and we need to find a solution. We need to make a terminology on it. What is it exactly? and we find several training programs. One, what they set up in the movie, is my point of view. It's my personal point of view. I survived, but because I reduced the power without any artificial horizon at this time, without any instrument training. But anyhow, we need to find solution. The solution can be with more instrument training, but even with an IFR training to turn in a valley, probably you don't have the training for that. Anyhow, I think we are on the good way. We are all together in the same boat. We are all in the same ship. We are in the ship of safety, enhancing helicopter safety. And we need to work together. And it's not this technique of this one, or this technique of this. I sell nothing in my life. That's for sure. I show things, but I sell nothing.
And I think one of the great things about these discussions is all these different point of views. And actually, maybe we've got quite a few comments. Some I can are more questions and some are comments. So there's a comment actually from Robert Denny talking about MVG, can sometimes sucker you into an IMC in some situations where you have an enhanced visibility and then it's gone. And from his own US Air Force training, there was a big point of that. Maybe you can add some comments on MVG, that kind of situation in MVG.
Yeah, absolutely. NVG has also limits. Huh? Everything has limits. It could lead to an IMC, the NVG. Even with the NVG, you do an NVG flight and you are back at the airport, you say, whoa, 20 centimeters, 10 inches or 20 centimeters of snow. We didn't see the snow in the air. If you don't put the landing light, you don't see the snow, huh? Depending if you fly. So, of course, it may also lead to IMC situations, the NVG, but it's a matter of training too. Also, of course, you need to know which situation may lead to an IMC with the NVIS. Even it's the delayed, you fly further in bad weather, but may also lead to an IMC. It's not all black and white. Huh? We have between the gray area. It's not clear sometimes. And what is important that all the people who got experience went to IMC with the NVIS, they should write reports. They should put all together. And after that, we can redo the scenarios in the simulator. Okay, you have very humid air. You had that, and you have a small residual light. It was just enough for the NVIS, but we need to put all together what we have, and that's we're doing tonight. We get experience of people. And that I think that's the way that we could avoid UIMC in the future. It's not avoided by NVIS, but it's almost a lot of them are avoided by NVIS because as I told at the beginning in the movie, I had 3 UIMC. 2 I had an IFR rating and was able to climb. Once the aircraft was not certified, but equipped. Once it was equipped and certified, no problem. And the region who allowed me to climb, it was not in the Alps. So anyhow, we need to avoid UIMC. It cannot be the future that we have 10 or 20 accidents per year of UIMC and just count the accidents. We are needing to work together to take all the energy we have, take the energy of experienced people. I'm not the only one. I have IDs sometimes. I put IDs on the market, but I'm not the only one. I'm nothing special. I'm pilot, and maybe sometimes thinking a little more to develop things, but we need to work all together. And after to set up a program for the training, what you need to train in case of UIMC. First avoid, but if you are in, we need to do something. We have other example which I didn't show in the movie. can easily be very critical, but we didn't have the time because the movie is already 23 or 24 minutes. And so I was not able to put all the situation in. We can be very delicate, we can be very critical. So that's, it's a matter, yeah, but we need to discuss around it. Training for that is the future, that I'm sure. Anyhow, yeah. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, so we've got quite a few here, so I'm just trying to come back through some others. And perhaps one thing I could say to, if there's anybody particularly who wants to, we can unmute people individually. So, you know, perhaps I know Christian Muller, you've asked quite a few questions also, Christian, and also Peter Muller as well, and others, Chris Hill. If any of you want me to unmute you, just drop me a message in the chat. And I can unmute you and you can add something into the discussion here as well. Don't want to put people particularly on the spot when we weren't planning it, but it's always possible if anybody wants to add that in the chat. So somebody, Stefan Hitzer, asks, he says, given that there is enough room to maneuver, is it a bigger risk to reduce power, do a non-standard turn 25 degrees and still miss the spot you had VMC a moment ago? Would it be better to keep everything stable and do an 80 degree, 260 degree maneuver? Does that make sense?
80, 260 degree in a valley, maybe it's not possible. You know, you cannot first go to the valley side. It can be an 80, 260 degrees and it's absolutely a solution, I agree. But if you are flying over a flat area, I agree, if the pilot is IFR, because the changing from 80 degrees to 260 degrees, it's not easy because you're changing totally from left 20 degrees bank to right 20 degrees bank. It needs to be, it's an IFR training. Absolutely agree. It could be a solution depending where you apply this. Absolutely agree, because you are at the same place. With a 80, 260 degrees, you're coming back on the same place. You're coming back on your last visual reference point, not in the same view, maybe, but you're coming back to the same place. Absolutely, I agree, it's a solution, but for me, with an IFR rating, currency and everything, otherwise, could be very difficult. And what I said also, with the reduction of the power, you reduce the IMC time to the half or to the third, you know. And if you are not IFR rated and you are in an unintended IMC, in my case, it was roughly 80 seconds, a little more than 56. But in my case, it was roughly 80 seconds. But if you reduce the power for 180 turn, you reduce the IMC time from 1 minute to half a minute, so 26 seconds. And that is probably also something we need to discuss. But anyhow, it's on the floor now. Everybody can use it, train it, and say, okay, it makes sense. But the 80 to 160 degrees, probably a very good solution if the crew has, for example, the HEMS crew is IFR, has the training. It's one of the solutions, except in the valley, where I don't see the solution, and without reduction of the speed.
And there are some interesting other kind of comments and questions, so I'll kind of rush through as many as you can. Some of them will be questions and some of them are more comments. So Hans says, why does the development of PIS approaches for helicopter more using new technology for approaches lacking in so many countries? Helicopters and pilots are capable, but the infrastructure is not there. I know, this is where, particularly when it comes to improving technology and then the implementation of technology, is very much at the heart of a lot of the the regulatory work that many authorities are doing to provide, enable better access. And for example, one of the things that we do have recently, and actually there's a new risk assessment guide for people designing airspace, is using it. So there's something in Europe, for those who may or may not know, called EGNOS, which is the global GPS system, and or the European GPS system. And through work with the European agency who responsible for that, we've actually developed now procedures and processes to enable IFR approaches to effectively VFR in VFR situations. So there's lots of work on that particularly supports exactly what you're talking about there. There's maybe worth mentioning, Christian Muller has included in the chat there also the link to his to the NGFT risk analysis, pre-flight risk analysis tool. And there's also other ones. We've actually got an article on the community site that I remember, Michel, we wrote some time ago about the different apps for pre-flight risk assessment. So it's particularly worth mentioning that, and I think we'll do some more posting of that. And actually, there was another comment I'd seen from somebody about making more apps and tools more accessible to the community. And again, that's a key part of certainly EASA. I know other authorities trying to do that. Some people might remember we actually, EASA, as part of our GA roadmap, we had a GA safety award that awarded prizes to apps that improved safety, specifically more in the GA context in this sense, but many had similar application to the helicopter side of things. So yeah, lots of Raphael, for example, commenting that good risk analysis during the flight stunning stage is such a key point. I think we can all agree with that. And Christian Muller particularly, kind of reinforcing the point that the quicker you can get out of a situation and regain visual references, that if the situation then is worse around you. Maybe you can say a few words on that, Claude, about once you're out of the situation, is then the importance of deciding potentially landing as quickly as possible and safely, so that you don't risk going in it a second time or a third time and making the situation even worse. I think that's another important part of the decision, is what you do once you've made the recovery. It's not necessarily that now it's all plain sailing, is it?
Maybe not finished, depending where you are. So, and if you have a patient in the back, they're becoming difficult decisions. Huh? But anyhow, if you just went IMC and you are out, probably it's time to relax a little bit and not to go back in the same situation. Probably not go to this destination, but go to an alternate or land somewhere. It's better because, you also what your body does with an IMC situation. What I had, I can't tell you. It's I could walk without the bones because the muscles were blocked. So that means also if you have a big stress like this when you went IMC unintended, probably you should reduce and go land somewhere, because I'm not sure that you have your full capacity after an event like this. I remember I was not a smoker, but I was like this after the landing. And probably you are not in full capacity after an event like this. The best is with a helicopter where you can land or proceed to the alternate, and it's probably the best thing you can do. And sit back and relax and say what was not today. But anyhow, there are so different kind of possibility. You may have the situation from the terrain, from the sea, from whatever you can have. Also very critical is flat light. It's another problem where you can lose reference. We also work on a movie now what is flashing fog. Everybody knows what is flashing fog since the pandemic, because you're wearing a mask and suddenly you have flashing fog inside. And on the helicopter, we already showed the part of the movie. Flashing fog outside can be very critical, even inside too. So we are preparing. There's also a loss of visual reference. It's a movie about the flashing fog and how to avoid them. That is also very interesting. There are also fatal accidents with flashing fog. I had one time flashing fog also. Really, it was once again everything was closed outside. No reference at all. But that is so. There's so many situations may lead to loss of visual reference. Flat light too. If you fly over covered snow, flat areas, and you have overcast, suddenly you see nothing. You have loss of visual references. If you are flying in a whiteout or brownout, you have also loss of visual references. It's not only the IMC who leads to accidents, but other conditions may also lead to loss of visual references. And we need to address all of them.
And actually, there's a really good comment in the chat. In fact, it might even be worth, I'll summarise the key points from the chat over the next couple of days and post that as well on the community site. But there's one from somebody, I can't remember the name, it was a bit further down, but talking particularly about, he does a lot of firefighting, flying, and obviously when you release water from the helicopter, or from the Bambi bucket, etc., that can often lead to a loss of visual references just with the vapor and things. So it's interesting, other examples and situations that you mentioned there of losing visual references. There's an interesting, particularly an interesting question here about VFR on top, and perhaps if you end up in an unintended on top situation, whether you have any tips for that. If you're on top, but you're trying to, you particularly if you've got little fuel left, what kind of, would you offer any particular piece of advice for somebody in that situation? Put you on the spot a little bit here. It's quite a difficult one. I can imagine lots of situations.
Probably you should not be there with empty tanks, because the first thing, if you are going on top somewhere, or sometimes you are climbing, suddenly you're on top. Very nice. But you don't see any mountains anymore, and that as long you have a escape to land in VMC, there's not a problem with the helicopter. Maybe can be a legal problem because you cannot do outside landing in some country, but anyhow, safety first. Precautionary landing, that's all. But really to be on top and to have a procedure, homemade procedure like I have no solution. Of course, there are existing solutions, but I don't want to give it here to the panel because otherwise we start a big battle about this. They are not. The only solution is to avoid to be somewhere with empty tanks, and you cannot descend. If you are not IFR, what do you want to do? That I have no solution at the end. And we see that quite a lot of accidents. We find that pilots climbing on top and suddenly they're on top. And what now? It must be terrible because without an IFR or IMC training to go down, even if you have the new avionics in front of you, you cannot use it. And probably it's also one thing I want to address. We need to change the avionics. They are too complicated because you have synthetic vision, you have everything, but the people are not able to fly with them. And I know I see solution how to implement things that are making very easy in case of this situation to control the aircraft. And that probably also, because now we have more and more avionics, probably overload for a VFR flight, 2 panels like this, 3 panels, but the people are lost. It's like watching television and you don't know which language they are playing, and you don't know the game they're playing. Sometimes I have the impression people are totally lost with the avionics, and that is terrible because the younger generation, they're used to. With the mobile phone, they used to play iPad, but they're not used to making the correct interpretation of the attitude, the speed, and everything. They're not able.
And I think I think that highlights really, it continually comes back to the training, doesn't it? I realise we're coming into the last 10 minutes now, and I was just monitoring the chat there, and I'll keep coming back as we get chance. But interestingly, Horst Pratsch made an offer. He'd been in a situation just to, I'm going to unmute you, Horst, and hopefully you can get the chance to, I've requested to see if you can unmute. There we go. Maybe you can have the chance to just talk a bit about your situation. And actually, if you have chance, that would be great.
Do you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thanks.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make it quick. It was many years ago in a 500 somewhere in the US, and it was ground fog and low stratus clouds, and I was flying along and thinking I should what I should do, and suddenly the ground fog, the fog lifted, and the stratus clouds dropped, and I was immediately in the white. And what saved me that day was that I already got slow. I was already at about 60 knots, somewhere between 60 and 70 knots, and I did the 180-degree turn, and I don't know how long it took me to get out of IMC, but probably no longer than 30 seconds. If that would have been longer, I think I would have not talked about it today. And I experienced exactly what Claude talked about. I flew back maybe for 10 minutes, and I had to put down the helicopter somewhere in an open field and turn off the engine and relax for, I don't know, half an hour to get back to be able again to fly.
Yeah. Thank you. It shows exactly what I tried to explain. If you reduce the power, the IMC time is much shorter, and the probability to control the aircraft is bigger. Of course, that is for me, and thanks very much, Horst. For me, in summary, is the late adaptation of the speed, beside the flight planning. We don't discuss about the plannings. Is the late adaptation of the speed, of the ground speed, to the DVE, and that is one of the most killing factor of the things. And of course, also probably with the high energy new helicopter, when you brake rapidly, you have a huge increase of the rotary RPM. And one thing of the technique which I developed also is that you cannot catch the rotary RPM with the collective at high speed because it climbs immediately. What I do is just a small bump like this. That reduce immediately the rotor. It's not a low G, Tim. We don't do low G. It's really absolutely just a small bump, and that takes the rotor like this and reduce immediately from 110 to. And so you are able to reduce the speed. That is very interesting too. I will come on the market with this technique of quick stop, which I explained. We already shoot the movie. I need only to have time to set up everything. But anyhow, in summary, I want also to say something. I do worldwide training, on-site training for companies, safety courses, adaptive courses. We do also practical training, offer this training not from the foundation. It's a company, leocopter.com, who is in charge of all my trainings worldwide. And so if you have a question, not ask me, please try to go to this company, Leocopter, because they are organizing very well the seminars around the world. So and that is something I want to say here, that anyhow, this example of Horst shows exactly what I'm trying to tell from the beginning. Reduce the power, reduce the speed, maintain the control, either holding the cyclic with your upper tight, and you will see it's a possibility. Of course, I don't say that we need to fly in worse weather because we have a technique to escape. That is wrong. But we need to have a technique, and it should be mandatory, in my point of view, for everybody who's flying helicopter, especially in a commercially CPLs or higher, that they have a technique. We cannot explain them once they're IMC that they call the manufacturer. It's too late. And for me, that is the biggest message of tonight. And I must also say the initiative of John was great. We discussed several times before we found which topic we want to do first. And we decided at the end together that we are doing this UIMC with this great movie. And thank you again, VRM Switzerland, and EASA too. Also, Gerald Wiener, because he is not only the windshield cleaner in the movie, he is also the rescue pilot of the 429, and he is also the CEO of EASA. It's a good friends. We are together almost 38 years of aviation. And thanks very much for all the people who helped make this great movie, because the movie will be a long-lasting movie. You can watch it 10 times, you will find out new things. Possibly you are not agree with everything, but doesn't matter. Even if you are not agree, that challenge your brain. You start to thinking about what I want to tell there. So even if you are not agree, it's absolutely possible that you're not agreeing with what I'm telling at all, but watch the movie 10 times and you will see how many messages are inside there and packed inside.
And I think this is one of the great things I've really enjoyed this evening is, whilst we know there are lots of different views on this topic, and that's why it's not officially an EASA official video in this context, but it's great still to be able to expose to the widest possible community these different what you've done with this video with the Recovery Foundation, etc. So it's really exciting, and there's just some kind of final points to make. Perhaps it was interesting that Beatrix commented that she's really enjoyed the discussions, and she was really interested in the situations of people who were in an IMC, UIMC, and how they got out. And interestingly, we've been doing with our own colleague Vendel Lynch, who I know Vendel's on, so hi Vendel, who leads our GA promotion work. We did a project with some people in Mönchengladbach a year or so ago, just before COVID, where we got people, put them in a simulator, but as part of the people applying to be part of that process, we've got lots of stories from GA pilots, and it'd be great to, we're going to fairly soon start sharing different stories from different pilots. So, particularly people here we know who have reached out already in the chat. We'll come back to you, and it'd be great to get your own stories and find out more about that. There's an important point from Rob Johnson and Rob Hyde. Great that you could join us, and the fantastic work you do on the HEMS side of things and with the EHA HEMS group, etc. But particularly, he talks about where weather conditions are marginal, they encourage crews to discuss CRM implications when they unintentionally enter IMC, and particularly the emphasis on allowing the pilot to fly the aircraft to get safe without the clinical crew in the HEMS context then asking where the patient is going and that kind of thing, which is, again, that CRM implication is quite good. And there are lots of other things that we could cover. Fortunately, we don't have time to do. Just a few kind of last shout outs and things to continue to see what we're the material that we're posting on the community site, particularly just in terms of some mentions of some upcoming events for people in 2022 to watch out for. It's a GA event, but there's a helicopter part of it, is the Aero event in Friedrichshafen that will take place at the end of April, 27th to the 30th of April in Friedrichshafen in Germany. The HAI Heli Expo, 7th to the 10th of March in Dallas. And then particularly worth continually talking about the Vertical Aviation Safety Team, the VAST, as I said, that we work with as a global collaboration. And the first VAST conference will take place in Fort Worth in the US on the 4th to the 6th of October. And then we also will have the next version of European rotors. For those who didn't make it this year with the different COVID challenges, hopefully things will be better next year. But for sure, we'll hopefully be there on the 8th to the 10th of November 2022 there as well. Michel, any last comments from you just before we finish the session?
Well, I just wish to warmly thank every participant for their interest, questions, comments. It really means that this was a highly technical conversation regarding, as we know, a very high risk, and we all agree that flight preparation in further should never find yourself in that situation. All agree on that. The problem is, should you find yourself there, what can you do? So Claude has presented, and we've discussed his proposal, his technique, and lowering speed is quite important indeed. There are other possibilities: climb, land, complete turn. None of these are perfect, and it was very interesting and useful to have this debate on this warm topic, I would say. Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michel, for joining us. And Claude, any last words from you?
Yes,
And
yes.
thanks to you.
Yes, thank you for all the questions, all the participants, and I really appreciate. I must emphasize that we are a non-profit organization. We are working with donation. We are all volunteers, but we cannot make movies. I will come on the market probably February with the movie How to Avoid the Vortex Ring State. That is a trilogy. This is the part one, a half an hour, amazing animations. Sign up in the member section. If you are in the member section of the foundation, it's for free, and you have first access to all movies. So you don't need to pay to be in the member section, but you have, once you're in the member section, you get an email that the movie is online, and you're the first to see the movie maybe several weeks before the others. So I suggest to go to the Vuichard Recovery Aviation Safety Foundation, RAS.org, sign in as a member. Once you will see the movie, I saw that several people are asking for the link for the movie.
Yeah, I'll post that again now in the chat as well.
So look this movie 10 times, look it on a big screen, look what the message are, and think that we did a big work for a long time. Probably took me 1.5 months to set up this movie for everything. And I appreciate any help in the donation, what we are to achieve my goal to save human lives. That is my message.
Fantastic, and a very worthy cause. And I've just posted in the chat there again that link, and maybe as soon as we close out this webinar, I'll go into the LinkedIn group, Michel, and I'll pop that link in the LinkedIn group, so in case anybody wants to see it tonight as well. And as I say, we'll edit down the video. It takes a little while to do, and post that tomorrow at some point on the community site and all the follow-up. And yeah, I can only say, huge thanks to Claude, to Philippe and Simon, and all of the guys at VR Motion and EASA, and to Claude and the Recovery Foundation for the work on the video. It's a phenomenal piece of work, and really moves the discussion forward. So it's great to have. Thanks hugely, Michel, for all the support and everything he does supporting us in the team, and also to particularly to Bernd Oswald from Airbus Helicopters, who supports us as the co-chair of the ESPNR with Michel. There's a million people that we could mention in ESPNR, and similarly to Chris Hill at HAI and all of the team in the VAST as well, that we work together on all of this. So yeah, it's been a great effort, and thanks very much, and hopefully it was enjoyable. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a safe Christmas, and we'll see you for more of these events hopefully in the new year. Thanks everybody. Goodbye.
Fly safe.
Yeah,
Fly safe.
Exactly.
Happy landings.
Fantastic. Thanks everybody.
Thank you. If I still have 10 seconds, I saw the question at the end of the chat is, when we talk about the LinkedIn group, is the ESPNR group on LinkedIn. If you type ESPNR EASA, you will reach the page with all the links you need to get to that LinkedIn group. That's the easiest. You type ESPNR EASA.
In fact, what I can do quickly, Michel, is I'm going to go to the group anyway. So I can quickly go in and I'll find the group number and I'll post it in the chat just for any last people who are still hanging around.
The problem with the chat, John, it seems that it stays only a second or two maximum and then disappears.
Yeah, well, it jumps up and down a little bit, so it makes life a little bit complicated. But yeah, so just waiting for the page to load. There we go. Okay, I'll put it there in case anybody needs it. There we go. Okay. Okay. Right, I'm just going to quickly put that link in there. To the, there we go. Okay, I'll just quickly put this in the chat.